Hello and welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your otherwise busy day to join us for this webinar and learn about 5 enticing international markets. In 2005, when I was running my own small online store, I received a message from a shopper in the United Kingdom. He was interested in buying some of the Wild West themed toys that we sold and asked if I would open up our site for shipping to the UK. We did it, and surprisingly, we started making more and more and more international sales. That experience gave me my first taste of cross-border e-commerce, and ever since, I have been excited about the opportunity to sell products to a community of interested consumers regardless of location. Well, before I go too much further, I should take a moment to introduce myself and the other presenters you will hear from today. So my name is Armando Roggio. I'm a senior contributing editor with Practically Commerce. I've also owned and worked for online retailers for a number of years. Next, we'll have Gagan Mara. Gagan is managing director of Deloitte Digital, an international consulting firm. He is a longtime contributor to Practically Commerce. He's an expert in e-commerce and data, and he has worked in multiple industries across 4 continents, deploying various e-commerce solutions. Then Mike Eckler will speak to us about payments. Mike is an advisor and independent consultant on financial technology. He provides leadership and insights on innovation, challenges, and product management. He is also a contributor to Practically Commerce, and he has worked in the digital payments industry for 20 years, having held senior positions at companies like PayPal. So here's what you can expect in the next 30-odd minutes, and I bet we ran over. But I will present the first 2 sections. Gagan will speak about shipping, Mike will cover payments, and then I will rejoin you for the top 5. So let's get started. The United States is frankly one of the best e-commerce markets in the world, and there are many reasons for that status or ranking. For example, a typical American consumer spends $2,000 or more per year online. That's according to several sources. And collectively, U.S. retail e-commerce sales were more than $500 billion last year and expected to reach or exceed about $740 billion in just the next 4 years. So you can see that on this chart. The United States is also relatively easy to do business in. Whether you're in Windsor, Canada, selling cross-border to Detroit, or really anywhere in the United States, there are relatively few regulations to comply with or market barriers to overcome. The United States also has relatively good logistics, which makes selling online possible, and more than 10% of America's total retail sales come from online orders, which is a good indicator of both how well e-commerce is established in the United States and how much growth opportunity still exists in the nation. I mention this because something like 40% of Practically Commerce readers in 2019 so far are from the United States. So given that majority, it's likely that when we say cross-border sales in the context of this webinar, those American business owners and managers are thinking of selling outside of their domestic market. This begs a question. Why? If you have such a strong domestic market, why do you want to take on the challenges of selling across borders, dealing with duties, language translation, or local or regional laws? Why do you as a business leader want to do that? Similarly, if you are an e-commerce entrepreneur or business leader in India, you too have a strong domestic retail e-commerce market. According to data from eShipWorld, there are some 360 million online shoppers in India. That is a very large market for your products. So why seek to sell in other nations? The answer, of course, is expansion, growth, the ability to increase sales volume, profits, or the size of your company. Okay, if your e-commerce business is publicly traded, or if it dreams of being publicly traded, or maybe you have angel investors seeking a return, your company needs growth. And selling retail products across international borders represents an expansion opportunity for a number of reasons, including the ones you see on your screen right now. Let's do a couple of what ifs. Let's imagine that you sell a niche product like White's boots, okay? These are premium work boots. Folks who have worn them for years love them and would wear nothing else. White's fans are often cowboys or cowgirls. They live in a country setting, a country lifestyle. And again, they're very loyal to the brand. But White's Boots is not necessarily a booming brand in the United States. And frankly, competition is stiff. White sells direct to consumer online, so it's selling boots domestically. There is Baker's Boot and Clothing Company out in Eugene, Oregon, which is one of the largest or highest volume retailers for White's boots. You have D&B Supply in Idaho and Oregon, which is a company I used to work for. They're doing a relatively huge business in White's boots. So if you want to start selling White's online or increase your sales, it is challenging. Unless you start selling, in Saudi Arabia, as Google Trends data shows. So, as I just mentioned, this is Google Trends data for web searches of the phrase White's boots. The scores are relative, so the United States having a score or rank of 100 simply means that as nations go, the United States has the highest number of searches for White's boots, but Saudi Arabia has a score of 89, which is perhaps a lot of activity for a region you might not expect to be enamored with cowboy-style work boots. Thus, if you are selling in the competitive U.S. retail market for Whites, you might want to start shipping, selling across borders to Saudi Arabia, where you could find, emphasis on could, a strong market and fewer or weaker competitors. You still need to do some research, but this scenario demonstrates for us why an online retailer might wish to expand its business internationally. Okay, that is the improved competitive position from this list. There are also relatively large markets available. Okay, as you can see with this data from eShopWorld, China has $630 billion in e-commerce revenue in 2018. That is a very large available market. Those orders, the $636 billion in retail online purchases in China, they came from about 1 billion online shoppers. Again, that is a large available market. What might be even more relevant in our context is that 149 million Chinese shoppers made cross-border purchases. So once more, that is a large available market. Let me restate this for American businesses. It is true that the United States is a good market for e-commerce, but as Shopify pointed out in its global e-commerce playbook, some 85% of the world's consumer purchasing power is outside of the United States. Okay, I'm not going to belabor this point too much, but you should understand that there are some very good reasons to look across international borders for business, for revenue growth, and for profit growth. But how do we know if a particular market is right for your product or your brand? I am going to suggest a process for you. Okay. These 4 items represent 2 distinct phases or steps in the process of choosing an international market for your e-commerce business. The first 3 items are meant to help you identify potential markets so that you end up with a short list of nations to consider. The last point will help you vet an international market. So it is the process of deciding if one or more of the nations on your list should be considered and perhaps tested. Now, in this 30-minute webinar, I have just enough time to give you the framework, if you will. So you're going to need to take the suggestions I give you and run with them a little bit. So let's get started. One of the first and easiest things you can do to develop a list of potential international markets for your e-commerce business is to look at your own site traffic data. Okay? I think if you had this as your analytics report and you were getting 12% of your site traffic from India and about 5.5% of your site traffic from the United Kingdom, you'd want to add those nations to your international expansion consideration list. Okay? Easy, right? This is what I mean by examine your site traffic. Look to see if you are already getting site traffic across borders. If you are, why not add that nation or those nations to your list of potentials? Okay. Speaking of that list, you can also review your current sales or current abandoned cart data. In the example image, we're showing an abandoned cart. The customer is French President Emmanuel Macron, and President Macron wanted to buy a couple of electric bikes, but had to abandon the checkout because this retailer doesn't sell to France. If you had abandoned carts like this one in your sales data, you may have identified another potential market, right? Another thing you might look for in your current sales data is a freight forwarding address. This is an idea I got from Shopify. They suggest looking for orders that are coming from different customers that use the same shipping address or the same US address. You make a list of those duplicate shipping addresses and compare them to a list of leading freight forwarders like Stackery, MyUS, Viking Ship, or similar. Okay? Thus, looking at current sales data may show you that your company is already getting international interest. This step is also fairly easy, right? Researching potential markets is what you're doing right now. Toward the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you a list of 5 international markets you should consider. And you don't have to stop with me or with this presentation today. You can Google best markets for cross-border e-commerce or something similar. Thus, by looking at your site traffic, examining your current sales, and doing a bit of research, you should have generated a list of potential international markets to carry forward into the next step. A couple years ago, Tractor Supply opened a physical store in Emmett, Idaho. It was September, and the company had a full pallet stack of dehumidifiers, similar to the one that you see on your screen. Now, in December, as we're presenting this webinar, relative humidity can rise in Idaho. But in September, when Tractor Supply opened that location, things are pretty dry with an average relative humidity of about 38%. Bottom line, Idaho shoppers are not likely to buy very many dehumidifiers in September. It's just simply too dry already. So inventorying a pallet stack in Emmett, Idaho was, if you will, a misunderstanding about the size of the market for dehumidifiers in that particular geographic location. It was the market opportunity that was misunderstood, if you will, in that location. You don't want to make a similar mistake when you start cross-border e-commerce. So you want to estimate the size of the available market, the opportunity in that market or in that nation, and you want to understand what your potential for success is. Now, again, given our context, a relatively short presentation, I'm going to point you to an analysis that should help without giving the specifics of how to conduct each part of that analysis necessarily. The particular analysis I'm recommending is called PESTLE. And as you can see, it's made up of political, economic, social, technological, legal, and ethical considerations. And here's a quick example. If you are considering selling into China, you will want to look at current political trends to decide, if there are any potential barriers. For example, how could U.S.-China trade relations right now impact your business? Okay. If you skip down a bit, you see legal. This part of the analysis might look at what it takes to do business in a particular nation. Will you need business licenses? Are there product restrictions or registration requirements? Okay. Ultimately, we're trying to identify the external or environmental factors that impact the size and the relative opportunity or viability in a given market. There is not really, in my opinion, a shortcut for this. As you do your research, you're going to need to find resources like these, which will help you to understand your target markets. The CI World Factbook is particularly helpful, as is export.gov. Then I guess I'll sum up a little bit. So in this first section, this is what I want you to come away with. There is an opportunity for expansion into markets across borders, but you need to do a bit of work to identify which markets might make sense for your business, and then you need to decide if, in fact, you'll make enough sales in the country to merit your investment. Okay. Finally, I recommended a PESTLE analysis of each market that you're going to consider in order to help you understand the opportunity there. Once you've narrowed the field of potential new cross-border e-commerce markets, you should do some testing. And frankly, I think that testing starts with marketplace sites like Amazon. For example, this is a screen capture of the Amazon UK homepage from a couple of days ago. You can tell it's the UK because there's all the football or soccer references shown everywhere. But the point is that one of the easiest ways to begin to test a market is to place products on that nation's most popular e-commerce marketplaces. Doing so will give you a perfect view, or an imperfect view of demand, but it'll still give you enough information to understand how your product will be perceived. I also recommend buying some pay-per-click ads to promote your products on those marketplaces, since understanding how competitive PPC placements are for the product will also give you insights into the market's potential. And all of this should take place, really, I think, before you make a significant investment into changing or improving your web presence in those markets. Okay, now I'm going to turn things over to Gan, who is going to speak to you about cross-border shipping challenges and how to overcome them. Gagan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Armando. I will talk about cross-border shipping challenges. We have identified these 4 challenges that a merchant needs to overcome to be successful with cross-border shipping. Let's go through each of these challenges and present how to overcome them. Customers expect accurate cross-border shipping charges shown to them before they place the order. These charges include price of the products along with shipping charges, tax, duty charged by Customs Department of the destination country, and any additional fees specific to that locale. Orders that exceed a certain amount should offer insurance. This makes the customers less concerned about the products getting damaged or lost during transit. Merchants should utilize third-party vendors to calculate accurate taxes. Merchants should not try to manage this themselves. And lastly, the merchants should allow the customers to make a payment in their local currency. If this is not supported, then the site should allow the customer to pay in merchant's local currency. Moving on to the second challenge. The right shipping vendors are critical for a merchant to be successful with cross-border shipping. These vendors know the local market and understand how to overcome locale-specific challenges like proof of delivery, expediting customs clearance, etc. They can also provide accurate shipping lead times to share with the customer. These lead times help the customer make a purchase decision, and they can also help the merchant in determining their inventory management strategy. Most cross-border shipping vendors partner with local courier companies for last-mile delivery to the customer, and often they do not offer online tracking of the order. This can be avoided by minimizing handling of the order to multiple shipping vendors for a single delivery, and also working with the local couriers to provide order tracking. Some international destinations restrict delivery of all orders or delivery of orders with certain products to a customer's shipping address. In this case, the merchants need to inform the customers if the delivery will be made to the local customs office or to a local post office. Moving on to the third challenge. Most merchants do not think about packaging challenges before enabling cross-border shipping. But packaging is extremely important as the merchants try to deliver products undamaged to the international customers. Each product needs to be reviewed if it requires special packaging, as the products will be in transit longer for cross-border shipping. Also, products that are perishable, fragile, or high value will require additional packaging considerations to be shipped internationally. Based on this analysis, the merchants might decide to exclude some products from the product catalog. It does not make sense to offer a product if the packaging costs exceed the product price. Merchants need to understand that the right packaging will reduce product returns, and it will also result in reducing the customer service tickets opened by the customer, resulting in overall reduction in operational costs and greater customer satisfaction. Moving on to the fourth challenge. The job does not end after delivering their product. Merchants need to ensure customer service is available to support the customer. If customer service is in local language and in the local time zone of the customer, it is even better. Products that have warranty coverage should have local partners for servicing the product versus sending the product back to the merchant. The preference is to return products locally too. If local returns are not possible, the merchant should clearly establish who would pay the international shipping charges for returns. And lastly, since delivery of products takes time, the merchants need to allow an extended return window, which is longer than the usual 30-day period. That is all for cross-border shipping challenges and how to overcome them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gagan. Next, Mike Eckler is going to present to us about cross-border payment requirements. Mike, will you please go ahead?
Thank you, Armando. As you consider expanding your business to new markets, markets that are outside of your home country, you'll want to think about a few things. Before I list the things you'll want to consider, I'd like to say that these aren't necessarily challenges or risks. They're not necessarily negative. Rather, savvy merchants will see these risks as opportunities. And by the very fact that you're participating in today's webinar, I think you can safely consider yourself to be savvy. It just means that you're thinking about new opportunities and new ways to improve your business. Another note, and my intention here is certainly not to sell you a solution, today's sponsor, Ecommerce, has some really good technology that can help turn some of these challenges into revenue-generating opportunities. So here are the things that I'd like to make sure you're considering as you think about international expansion for your business. And they are cross-border transaction fees, holding and converting foreign currencies in your merchant account, cryptocurrencies, a few new innovations in payment technology such as WeChat Pay and Alipay, and finally two acronyms, DCC and MCP, which stand for Dynamic Currency Conversion and MultiCurrency Pricing. Now let's take a look at each one of these individually. The first thing to consider before accepting international transactions is the additional fees that you as a merchant will incur. And we're talking about the dreaded foreign transaction fee. When a customer pays using a credit card issued outside of your country, additional work is involved. Not necessarily for you, the merchant, but for the card brands like Visa and MasterCard, and for the card issuing bank and your acquiring bank. Of course, all of these entities naturally want to be paid for the additional work and for the additional risk involved. Hence, when we accept foreign payments, we face the additional fees known as cross-border fees or foreign transaction fees. Your payment processor may call it something slightly different, but it usually appears on statements as cross-border fee or foreign transaction fee. Generally, this fee ranges from about 0.5% to 1.5%. Plus, there's an additional flat fee depending on the card, the country, and the payment processor involved. So that could add up to 1.5% on top of the 2.9 and 30 cents that you are already likely paying. Most independent businesses pay 2.9% and 30 cents on domestic transactions. You can see in the slide that I've added a simple screenshot from a popular payment provider where they outline the additional foreign transaction fees. And it gets up there, it's 4.4% plus that additional flat fee. So the question we have to ask is, are those additional fees worth it? For illustration, I've included a very simple example. Really, it's too simple, but it does help make the point. And the point is that on a $100 transaction, so $100 worth of goods being sold internationally, there would be an additional fee of about $1.50. In other words, that's $1.50 less revenue on a $100 sale. So the question obviously is this additional cost, that is the additional $1.50 in fees, is that a reasonable price to pay for the opportunity of making a brand new sale? A sale that you may not have achieved domestically. Would you have earned that sale? A sale that brought you an additional $95 in revenue domestically or otherwise? Additionally, and hopefully, that international customer becomes a happy customer, tells all of her friends, and brings you more business. So for that, I'd say that $1.50 is worth it. But each business operates a little bit differently, and you need to make your own business cases to help you decide. The second issue I'd like to speak about concerns holding and converting foreign currencies to your own home currency. And again, the thing to be aware of here are fees. Sometimes these fees are clearly stated, and sometimes, well, they're a little bit hidden. As a merchant with a merchant account, you have to decide if you want to hold foreign currencies or if you want to convert them. Not only that, you have to decide if you want the foreign currency to be converted immediately upon entering your account, or if you want to hold the currency and convert it at a later time. And the point here is that for the service of converting currencies, your merchant account provider will likely charge a fee, And that fee could be a flat fee, a percentage fee, or the fee could be baked into the foreign exchange rates that are more expensive than if you were to convert the funds yourself using any of the popular third-party foreign currency exchanges or even another bank. I'm not going to get into the entire world of foreign currency trading and exchange rates, even though that's quite fascinating, but the point is clearly that you have to check with your merchant account provider to see if their exchange rates and their exchange fees are reasonable. And just to give you a hint, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, these fees are not competitive. So the best practice is to check, to shop around, and to do the math on the true cost of accepting an international transaction. Having discussed foreign currencies and exchange rates, let's also talk about accepting cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Some of your potential international customers may not be able to pay with a credit card. Some may not even have a credit card. That doesn't mean that they aren't good customers, and it certainly doesn't mean that they aren't affluent. It just means that they don't have what we would consider a traditional payment card. They may have cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, however. So, should you accept cryptocurrencies? Well, I can't answer that question for you, but as a business owner, it's something that you might want to look into. And when you do look into it, there's a lot to consider. But the two main things are, first, how do you accept crypto on your e-commerce site? There are solutions available, but it's still quite a bit different than accepting a traditional credit card, and the user experience throughout the checkout is quite different. And the second thing is, what do you do with the crypto once it's in your account? Do you convert it? Do you hold it and wait for the value of the currency to go up? What happens when there are massive fluctuations in the value of the currency? If it goes up, you win. Sure, great. But if it goes down, can you accept that sort of risk? Next on the list are payment methods that North Americans might be less familiar with, but they're hugely popular, especially in China. Did you know that WeChat, the Chinese social media and payment app, has over 1 billion monthly active users? Of these billion users, about 900 million use the WeChat Pay payment service. That's truly incredible. And what if some of those users are considering purchasing from you? As with cryptocurrencies we discussed a moment ago, the important thing to consider here is the user experience during checkout, because with some of these payment methods, the payment flow during checkout can differ from what you have already developed. Many of the popular payment processors today offer integrations with WeChat Pay, and there are several useful plugins to make things a lot easier for merchants. Again, this might not be right for your business, but because of the enormous size of the market, it's something that you really need to at least think about. The last thing I'd like to discuss about accepting international transactions are two relatively new acronyms, MCP and DCC. MCP stands for MultiCurrency Pricing, and DCC stands for Dynamic Currency Conversion. These two technologies are all about making your customers feel comfortable and welcome. They greatly improve the user experience both in physical stores and on your e-commerce site. MCP is for e-commerce sites online, and DCC is for point-of-sales terminals physically inside of your store or another physical location. MCP either detects the customer's current location, usually from an IP address, or allows the e-commerce visitor to choose their country. It's usually one of those drop-downs with icons of the currencies or the country flags that are supported. When the site visitor selects her country or flag, all of the prices on the site are instantly converted to prices in the chosen currency. So the visitor doesn't have to use calculators and currency converters to figure out how much something actually costs. It's a very nice user experience improvement. It makes the buyer feel as if they're shopping domestically. They see pricing in the currency that they are most familiar with. DCC, Dynamic Currency Conversion, again, that's for physical point-of-sales terminals. It detects when an international credit card is being used and then prompts the customer, asking if they'd like to pay in their home currency. Of course, this only works in certain scenarios and only on the more modern payment terminals, but it's something to consider, especially if you have tourists, travelers or international students entering your store. Your payment processor will have more information about these solutions, and you should talk to them to see if they're right for your business. And with that, I think we can conclude this segment on some of the common challenges and the things to think about as you consider accepting international payments.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, we promised to show you our picks for the top 5 cross-border e-commerce markets, or the most enticing markets. Now, this is from an American perspective. So if you were in India, for example, I would put the US on this list, but for our purposes, this is again from an American perspective. Also, please understand that we picked generally good cross-border markets that would apply to many, if not most, e-commerce sellers in the US. Okay. So the UK was picked for 3 reasons. Essentially, there was a combination of good market size and relative ease of serving that market, particularly since you don't need to translate your product descriptions, etc. To be frank, Mexico may not appear on too many lists of top cross-border e-commerce markets, but it was included here not because of its size, which is about $25 billion in annual sales, but rather because it has a compound annual growth rate at or above 20%. What's more, nearly 70% of Mexico's online shoppers have made a cross-border purchase, and 75% of those cross-border purchases came from or aimed at the United States. And that's all according to data from export.gov. Next, for American businesses, Mexico is not too far to service, right? So returns and shipping may be relatively easier for that market. And finally, developing a Spanish language site or a Spanish language version of your site could actually boost domestic sales too. Let's see, according to eShop World, there are nearly 70 million online shoppers in Germany. Many of those folks were early adapters, willing to shop online well ahead of other markets. That's good. You combine this with the fact that some experts believe Germany has the best logistics services in the world. And, the market becomes very interesting. And finally, if you can sell in Germany, you may be able to easily expand into other nations in the EU or even the entire continental portion of the EU. Okay, as evidence, if you will, for the fact that Canada should be on your list of cross-border markets for the U.S. e-commerce businesses, I'm going to read you a couple of quotes. The first quote is from a July 2019 report from eMarketer, and it's the same report actually that included the chart that you're seeing on your screen. So here's the quote. Generations of Canadians have ritualistic dedication to searching for deals across the border, hopping in cars for day trips for lower prices on most goods, especially alcohol and gasoline. It's relatively simple for a country where 90% of its population lives within 100 miles of the U.S. border, to shop. I added that part in. With the advent of online shopping, the trend continues. Estimates vary on the volume of online sales in Canada sourced from outside of the country. Could be as much as half of total sales or as little as a quarter. Regardless of the exact proportion, the trend is clear. A significant portion of consumers in Canada shop from international sources, mainly U.S. sites. End quote. Okay. The next one comes from export.gov. Due to Canada's strong economy and proximity to the United States, retailers aspire to tap into the growing e-commerce market in Canada. For U.S. retailers who are selling beyond their borders for the first time, Canada offers an easy cross-border opportunity with similar taxes, fees, and shipping safety. End quote. Okay. China is the largest e-commerce market in the world, so in my humble opinion, it cannot be left out of a discussion of cross-border e-commerce expansion. While you may need to certify some products and follow some new-to-you e-commerce regulations, there are significant opportunities for American sellers